Good morning. Right. Okay. Now comes the sort of the hard stuff. So far, we've done a bit of the reasoning behind localized power production and waste to energy, and we've also talked about some of the technology, particularly in the waste area, because that's the most understandable. Now, what we're going to talk about is how to do it, the economics and the way in which it's structured. So this is a kind of a bit less interesting in some ways, but in other ways it's more important. Okay, so looking at Sefton as an area, it has the right demographics to be able to sustain waste to energy. It's got about 260,000 people living there, so it's quite a substantial community. So, what we want to do is we want to look at how you process this, how you get it going. Well, Sefton is lucky in one way because it's got the primary function, which is the production of fuel cells and the ability to make the waste to energy systems nearby in Liverpool. Liverpool is the location and domicile of a company called Scintilla CME Limited. Now, the reason I'm telling you about this is because this is kind of like the model that we work to. Scintilla CME Limited, the CME stands for Collaborative Manufacturing Enterprise. It's a company that fabricates the fuel cells, and to a lesser extent makes the waste to energy systems. And I'll explain that in a minute. Let's take the fuel cells first. The fuel cells have an intellectual property which cannot be divulged. So this is sort of like a bit of a secret company, or more to the point, it engages in the black art of making fuel cells. The IP, or intellectual property, belongs to a company called Sigma Citratus Limited. And this is a company that is not commercial. In other words, it doesn't make money and it doesn't ask for money. What happens is that this is where the intellectual property is stored. It has shareholders, but they're made up of old shareholders from the company that it originated from, which was Zetec Power Limited, which was a UK-based company, and at one time was the second largest fuel cell company in the world and the largest in Europe. It was betrayed and then destroyed, and I was the chairman of that company. So what I did is I promised all the shareholders of that company that they would have shareholding in any future work that I did, and I set up Sigma Citratus as an intellectual property company. So all the shareholders in Zetec still have shares in Sigma Citratus Limited. I did this because it was the right thing to do. It was a moral thing. I don't know that they'll ever get their money back, and I doubt it, but they will have the joy of knowing that they've actually not lost the principle, which was to bring clean energy. Now, I don't actually have any shares in Sigma Citratus Limited, and I don't, for a reason, because I don't want anybody to think that there's a conflict of interest, because there isn't. I do this because I have a firm belief in both the intellectual property and what it does and the benefits to the society. So Sigma Citratus provides the intellectual property to the collaborative manufacturing enterprises. So Scintilla CME has the intellectual property, or has rights to the intellectual property under license, to be able to manufacture fuel cells. This is local to Sefton to a certain extent. It is in the center of Liverpool, and was doing very well until recently, until it was attacked. There was an arson attack which destroyed the entire facility, but it's being rebuilt, and it's being rebuilt because of the dedication of the people who have been involved in the project. So they will probably within the next 3 to 4 months be able to manufacture fuel cells again. They are working on waste to energy. It is actually there. It was a technology that I developed in France, and has been now transferred over to Scintilla in Liverpool. So now we have the ability to be able to make the fuel cells and the waste to energy, but it's from a CMS, a collaborative manufacturing um, enterprise, CME, sorry, collaborative manufacturing enterprise. Now, so Sefton can actually get the kit, the fuel cells and the waste to energy systems via um, collaborative manufacturing enterprise, Scintilla, which is broadly in the northwest of the country. How does this work? Well, you have to be able to buy in, not the equipment, but buy in the use of the equipment. So Scintilla makes the systems and then installs it and gets it running, but it needs to be funded. The funding comes from the sale of electricity. Now, obviously, you can't sell electricity um, and be able to provide the equipment immediately, or in fact in advance of the use of the electricity. So what happens is that there must be a body that buys the electricity. This is where Sefton comes in terms of its own ability to be able to manage its own affairs. Because what is done is that an ESCO is formed, which is an electricity supply company. Now, the electricity supply company is a system whereby um, the end users or the clients of the electricity supply become subscribers. They become subscribers and they own the electricity supply company. So, say you're a household in Sefton, what you would do is you would contract with the electricity supply company for 5 years, say, for a given amount of electricity. This would be what we call the base load. So it would be the basic amount of electricity you consume over a year. This would this would be paid for uh, as you use it in exactly the same way as you would use electricity normally. The difference is that you would partly own the electricity supply company because it's subscriber owned. In other words, if you use the electricity, you own part of the company. So the rates are set by the electricity supply company and the subscribers. The subscribers determine the price. Now, the price is the base price of the electricity plus whatever the electricity supply company deems appropriate above that price. So, say the cost of the electricity was 5.5 pence per kilowatt hour, then the ESCO would charge maybe 6.5 or 7.5 pence per hour and be able to recirculate that money into either the community or back as a dividend to the subscribers. The base price is paid to whoever is going to buy the contracts. Now, I'll explain to you what that means. Assume that you have 10,000 subscribers. So you have 10,000 contracts for 5 years for a total amount of electricity. This is bundled and then brokered to people who would factor the funding. In other words, they would put the money up in advance to be able to supply the electricity, and they would take a profit over the years. Now, it's an interesting thing here because this is a sort of a startup period and then the longer period, and I'll explain the difference. So um, the factor is like any kind of factoring. It's a brokerage, and the contracts effectively are sold. So the bundle is sold to a broker, and that broker will make money out of it by charging a rate above the cost of electricity. So, say for example, the broker got an additional penny per kilowatt hour, so that would be 6.5 pence per kilowatt hour, which would still leave another penny to reach 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour. So the broker is now getting a return on his investment, and quite a substantial return in many ways, because the actual cost that he's going to put out is going to be the cost of the provision of the technology. So the technology is now paid for and installed and managed and maintained by the collaborative manufacturing enterprise in association with the ESCO. The ESCO being the electricity supply company that has the contracts for supply. Now, how that relationship works is dependent upon how the contract works, but the best possible solution is that the CME supplies and undertakes to provide maintenance as required by the ESCO. The ESCO actually should run it and should provide the maintenance and should be employed in its operation. That's the principle. And that's part of what it gets paid for out of the additional funds on the tariff. The rest goes to the brokerage or the factor. Now, this is not unusual, and factoring has gone on really since the coffee houses in London. It's not something that's clever or new or whatever. It's been around for a very, very long time. In effect, what it is it's an investment or a bet that they're going to get the dough from the tariffs being paid by the subscribers. Now, what happens after that 5 years is that all debts are paid off. So after that, whatever money is coming in is just money coming in, and maintenance costs or renewal, say, over a period of time. So you're able to renew parts over a period of the following 5 years. The average lifetime of these systems is about 10 years, but could go on longer, and they have a resale value in any event. So now we have a situation where the subscribers are paying 7.5p, but they're determining where 1p per kilowatt hour is going. So it could go for a multitude of things, including building up a greater system without having to have a factor. So eventually it becomes completely autonomous. It becomes a completely self-funding operation that is operated for the benefit of the subscribers. This is a big difference between what you have at the moment. It means, for example, because energy is, you've got to think of energy in terms of a currency. So if you're thinking about energy in terms of a currency, in other words, it's backed up by a concept of an exchange of value, then what happens is you're able to fund other things. For example, you're able to fund social care, you're able to fund schools, you're able to fund hospitals, because it's a considerable amount of money. If you want to go further, you can increase the tariffs, because it's up to the subscribers to decide whether they're going to pay more for their power. But more importantly, you can take advantage of things that you need to do in order to improve the economy of the area. For example, you could invest in building more capacity by building, for example, digital systems, digital centers, which would bring in AI, which would bring in research, which would bring in higher pay, which would bring in all kinds of different funding, etc. So the investment opportunities become investment rather than you paying out to the electricity supply that you get at the moment, which is 24 pence a kilowatt hour. You've got to keep that number in mind. 24 pence per kilowatt hour against sitting there and deciding that you're going to have your own electricity paid for by yourself in a system that is for you. So this is the way in which it works. Now, where do I come in? I don't. I'm a 78-year-old geezer who spends most of his time doing innovation and playing with fuel cells. That's what I enjoy doing. That's what I do. And my motivation is really to get back at the people who have stalled this over the years. So I'm in effect sort of a 78-year-old energy terrorist, but a terrorist with your benefits in mind. I want to be able to make sure that you are getting energy at a correct price, an environmentally sensible price, at zero emission, if not negative emission, and to be able to put the power to you, not to others. And that's really what this is about. And I really wanted to be able to get that across before the next session, which will be on fuel cells. And I shall start talking to you about the technology. Bye for now.